the gentle heart. The morning light filtered softly through the hospital room windows, casting a gentle glow across the pale blue walls. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her worn cardigan and stepped quietly into room 314, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the polished floor. She had been working as a caregiver for 3 years now, and each day brought its own small challenges and quiet rewards. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell lay propped against crisp white pillows, her silver hair neatly combed and her weathered hands resting on the hospital blanket. At 82, she had been Sarah's patient for the past 6 weeks, recovering from a hip replacement surgery that had been more complicated than anyone expected. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartwell," Sarah said warmly, settling into the chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling today?" Eleanor's eyes brightened as she turned toward the familiar voice. "Oh, Sarah dear, I'm so glad you're here. I was just watching the birds outside my window. There's a little sparrow that comes every morning." Sarah smiled and took Eleanor's hand gently in hers. The elderly woman's skin was paper-thin and cool to the touch, but her grip was surprisingly firm. This simple gesture had become their morning ritual, a moment of human connection that meant more to both of them than either would admit. The truth was Sarah was struggling. Her own mother had passed away the previous year after a long battle with illness, leaving Sarah with crushing medical debt and a heart that still ached with grief. Taking care of Eleanor reminded her of those final months with her mother, bringing both comfort and pain in equal measure. Sarah lived in a tiny studio apartment across town, taking the bus to work each day because her old car had finally given up the ghost last month. She counted every dollar survived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee, and sometimes lay awake at night wondering how she would make ends meet. But when she was here with Eleanor, none of that seemed to matter. "Tell me about the sparrow," Sarah said, settling more comfortably in her chair. Eleanor's face lit up. "He's quite bold, you know, hops right up to the windowsill and peers in at me. I think he's curious about what goes on in here." She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. "I've been in this room for so long now. Sometimes I wonder if anyone remembers I'm here." "I remember," Sarah said softly. "I think about you even when I'm not here." It was true. Sarah often found herself worrying about Eleanor during her off hours. The elderly woman rarely had visitors, and she never spoke about family beyond mentioning that she had a son somewhere who was very busy with work. Sarah had assumed he was probably struggling just like everyone else, maybe working multiple jobs to make ends meet and unable to visit regularly. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah continued her gentle care. She helped Eleanor with physical therapy, exercises, read to her from romance novels borrowed from the hospital library, and listened patiently as the older woman shared stories from her youth. Eleanor talked about her late husband, about the garden she missed tending, and about the son she clearly loved but rarely saw. "Michael was always so driven," Eleanor would say wistfully. "Even as a little boy, he had such big dreams. I just hope he's happy wherever he is, whatever he's doing." Sarah began staying a little longer each day, even after her shift ended. She brought Eleanor small gifts she couldn't really afford, a packet of flower seeds for when she got home, a soft bookmark, a small potted plant for the windowsill. These tiny gestures seemed to brighten Eleanor's spirits immeasurably. One afternoon, as Sarah was helping Eleanor with her lunch, she noticed the older woman seemed quieter than usual. "Are you all right, Mrs. Hartwell?" Sarah asked, setting down the water cup. Eleanor looked up with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, dear, I need to tell you something. I've been watching you these past weeks, seeing how hard you work, how tired you look sometimes. You remind me so much of myself when I was young trying to make my way in the world." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't realized her struggles were so apparent. "I may be old, but I'm not blind," Eleanor continued gently. "I see that cardigan you wear every day, probably because it's the warmest one you have. I see how you save half your sandwich for later. And I see the kindness in your heart, how you care for me as if I were your own grandmother." "You don't need to worry about me," Sarah said quickly, but Eleanor squeezed her hand. "What if I told you that kindness has a way of coming back to us?" Eleanor asked with a mysterious smile. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the hospital to find an unusual scene in Eleanor's room. A tall man in an expensive-looking navy suit stood by the window, his back turned toward the door. When he heard Sarah enter, he turned around, and she saw he had Eleanor's same gentle eyes and kind smile. "You must be Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Hartwell, Eleanor's son." Sarah shook his hand, surprised by his warm, genuine demeanor. This wasn't what she had expected from someone who rarely visited his mother. "Mom has told me so much about you," Michael continued. "About your kindness, your patience, how you've made her feel less alone during this difficult time." Eleanor beamed from her hospital bed. "Sarah, dear, I may have omitted a small detail about Michael's work. He runs a company called Hartwell Industries." Sarah looked confused for a moment, then her eyes widened. Hartwell Industries was one of the largest corporations in the state, known for their charitable work and employee benefits. She had seen their name on billboards and in the news. Michael noticed her surprise and smiled gently. "I've been traveling constantly these past months, closing a major acquisition in Europe. I know that sounds like an excuse," And maybe it is. I should have been here more for Mom. The important thing is, you're here now, Sarah said simply, and Michael's expression softened with gratitude. Mom tells me you've been like family to her, he said, and I'd like to talk to you about something, if you're willing. Over the next hour, Michael explained that he had been looking for someone to coordinate a new patient advocacy program at Hartwell Industries, someone with real experience and genuine compassion. The position would pay well, include full health benefits, and allow Sarah to help other families navigate medical care. But more than that, he wanted to personally ensure that Sarah's own medical debt from her mother's illness was cleared, as a way of thanking her for the immeasurable gift of caring for Eleanor. When he couldn't be there, Sarah sat quietly for a long moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn her life was taking. Then she looked at Eleanor, who was watching with tears of joy in her eyes. Sometimes, Eleanor said softly, when we open our hearts to others, the universe finds a way to open its heart to us. As Sarah held Eleanor's hand and felt the weight of worry lifting from her shoulders, she understood that this was more than just good fortune. It was the natural result of choosing kindness, even when kindness felt impossible. In caring for Eleanor, she had found not just a job, but a new family and a future filled with purpose. The afternoon sun streamed through the window. Outside, a little sparrow perched on the sill, as if witnessing this moment of quiet transformation.